To the Top Order podcast, all four of us back in a room for the first time in a couple of months. We are going to be talking at World Cup 2023 semi-finals and final preview. We've got one game to go in the tournament as we record this, so any spoilers in terms of Indian injuries, particularly going into the finals, this is being recorded before the India-Netherlands game this evening. But our predictions are still going to stand because we know who is in both semi-finals. We're going to tell you who's in the final as well. All coming up on the Top Order podcast. World Cup Cricket Finals preview. Feels weird to be back in the same room together. This has certainly been my little podcast studio the last 60 days or so. Is it really that long?
I don't think it's 60, but
it feels a long time. So what was it? October the 5th, and where are we now? Sort of
November.
Yeah, so not quite. Yeah, maths is poor there.
That's okay.
And yeah, certainly some mathematics were flying around the Slack channel last night. For viewers and listeners, Stu and Raj thought India Pakistan could bowl England out for minus 14 and chase them in 6 balls, but that didn't come to pass. So in terms of the semi-finals, we've got confirmation now of the semi-final. So that first semi-final, Wednesday, the 15th of November at the Wankhede, India versus New Zealand. So that's position 1 playing position 4. And then we've got the second semi-final, day-night game as well, Eden Gardens, which is, I think, where England played their game against Pakistan last night on a used wicket. So I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So that's position 2 plays position 3. But look, I think the format for this, Lippy, do you want to give us the explainer? Because I think you're the only one with any pre-prepared remarks, aren't you?
The format? Well, I think if no one knows how the semi-finals work, then I think
the format of the podcast, Stuart.
Oh, the format of the podcast. Okay. I think we're just freewheeling it, really. I think we're going to talk about these 2 semi-finals, aren't we? We're going to talk about kind of how we think they might play out. I think for New Zealand, certainly, I wouldn't mind kind of talking about the path to the semi-finals. I think it's been quite an interesting one for New Zealand and some sort of shades of tournaments past for them. But yeah, I think we're just going to look at these tournaments or look at these 2 semi-finals, work out the games, exactly like you said, tell the listeners and viewers who's going to win the games, and then they'll pick the other sides and cash their checks.
Cool. So the elephant in the room for me, and this is flying around a hell of a lot on social media at the moment, is India. And look, as we said right at the top of the podcast, they've still got 1 game to go, but I'm looking at Baldy's very snazzy little colour-coded greens and reds for wins and losses throughout the course of this tournament. India green across the board at the moment in terms of their record. So the question I want to open with before we probably talk a little bit about the teams is, from a format perspective, do we think it's a big enough advantage for potentially going 9 from 9 in the group stages, that really the only advantage that you've got, and look, regardless of whether this was India's home tournament or not, it doesn't really make a difference. It is, they've already got, that advantage, but we didn't know that going into the tournament. Their only advantage is that they get to play the 4th finish team. We've got so many tournaments around the world where we've got the dominators and the baconators and all these eliminators. Do we feel as if this, this format is really reflective of giving any advantage to that team that tops the table first and foremost? I'm sure we get lots of comments from our Indian listeners particularly.
I don't know. I mean, does anyone have strong thoughts? Because I don't really. I mean, when I look at the World Cups, it's always been like this. I sort of feel like that's fine, like semi-final, like the pool play is one thing and semi-final play is another. And even if you look back at Super Sixes and all of those other formats, it's still the same. You get to a knockout at some point. You get to a knockout game and you've got to win those games. And yes, you can say, I don't know. What do you think? Because rugby league is slightly different in terms of another sport that we follow very closely in terms of actually getting. Yeah, it's a bit more like the IPL or these other tournaments where you get a second chance if you're the top couple of qualifiers.
So personally for me, I like the everyone plays everybody round robin. I think that's the right way to do it. But I feel like it's a bit of a sharp drop off to only have 4 teams in the post-season, post-round robin play. I mean, you look at basketball, they have 60% of the teams make the playoffs, 50 something. NRL, half the teams make the playoffs. I do think it's a stage is missing there. I don't know what that is. And it's showing quite starkly by your green and red sort of table there that India probably deserves an advantage of some kind, because they've just absolutely dominated all the way through and everything is reset back to people in the teams in 3 and 4 actually have a massive mental advantage going into this game, because especially with New Zealand, it's almost like a free shot. If we lose, we're expected to lose against India in India. India have a weight of 1 billion people on their shoulders going into this game, and that may weigh on them. We don't know, and I think that's probably a little thing that they're...
Yeah, I concur with your thoughts on the group stage, and I think there should be a better reward, I think, as you alluded to, Binksy, for winning the group stage, or at least finishing in the top 2. A format like the McIntyre system, where teams that finish in the top 1 or top 2 have a second bite at the cherry at making the final, seems like a just reward for performing so well across a month and a bit of group play. India will have played 9 games. They could win 9 straight. And then, to go out in New Zealand in the semi-final would be, for Indian fans, I'm sure, a big letdown. So I think there is something to having a second bite at the cherry for those sides that finish in the top 2 would be the only adjustment to the format that I think I would make.
I do think that it is a good point in that, we play everyone plays everyone. And I remember talking when we did our preview around this format, I still feel like you find out who the best team is in this tournament. Who's been the best team across the 6 weeks or whatever it is by the end of the tournament. I agree with you guys though. If New Zealand beats India and they go out, I think that is a bit like India has been the best team. I'm prepared to sit here and admit right now that no matter what happens in this next, semi-finals and finals scenario, India has comfortably been the best team in this tournament. And if they don't win, then either they've done something wrong, a team's played absolutely brilliantly against them and to beat them on one day, and it means that potentially, they're not going to be lifting the trophy at the end of the day. So yes, perhaps it's something to look into. But like I said, at some point, you got to play these knockout games.
Yeah, definitely agree on that. So I think what we can safely say is that there's 3 of us for sure that think that we should have the McIntyre system.
That's the Australian rules.
Very good. Lippy, you are being extremely parochial, and you don't care whether New Zealand upset the apple cart. And
I care a lot. I hope it happens.
And India have a record of 9-1, and they crash out, and you scrape through on boundary count back. Okay, cool, no problem.
Won't happen this time.
Too early. Okay, right. Which semi-final are we going to cover first? Where do we want to go?
Chronological, I think.
Yeah.
Chronological.
Seems logical.
Okay, so let's go to Wednesday night then. So we've got India versus New Zealand in that first semi-final. Day-night game, Wankhede Stadium. 8:30 GMT, 2 p.m. local, and 9:30 p.m. here on the land of the long white cloud, shall we say. What are your initial thoughts now in terms of, we've talked a lot about permutations for New Zealand throughout the course of the tournament. Have they found, can we write down what that 11 is for New Zealand, do we think, going in, or are we still looking at the pitch and having a bit of a horses for courses component to selections?
I'm probably interested to get Raj's thoughts, because I'm very, as you said, I'm very parochial. Look, I've watched pretty much, as you say, the time difference here in New Zealand. These games are very, very tricky for us to watch at night. But I've pretty much watched every ball live of this New Zealand World Cup, which means not a lot of sleep. And in some ways, I'm kind of looking forward to the end of this World Cup. But it does sort of have, like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the road that New Zealand has had. It's got very, very 2019 shades in it, because in that tournament, New Zealand started out very well, kind of got on a roll at the start. Everyone was penciling them in for semi-final spots, and then they lost games to England, lost games to Australia, and kind of just sort of tumbled in like tied with Pakistan on net run rate. Pakistan ended up losing last night, and so that New Zealand actually finished higher on points. But it was a similar kind of scenario. We've played very, very well in those first 4 games, beat England. Everyone kind of thought that was a momentous game, and as it turns out, perhaps it wasn't. But I think it still was for New Zealand mentally, in terms of, we are here, we are ready to go. We're just beating the defending champs. We're a very, very good side. But then the last 2-3 weeks of this tournament haven't quite gone to plan. And, yes, we beat Sri Lanka, get in, but it feels like we sort of, again, have kind of stumbled into the semi-finals, as we always do, and now we're going, okay, like, we've got India again, can we do it again?
Yeah, I think if you do look back at the last couple of weeks you talk about where we've had those losses, I don't think there've been massive losses aside from the South Africa game. The South Africa game was a massive loss, but I think if you look at some of the losses the other teams have had, they have been much bigger losses against opponents they probably shouldn't lose games to, and things like that. I think New Zealand's actually been fairly consistent playing wise, so I'm not too concerned about that. I think the format that we just talked about gives New Zealand a great excuse just to forget about the last 2-3 weeks and play the game that's in front of them. In terms of the 11, your question there around the 11, I think if you look at the bowlers, you've got the Boult, Southee, Ferguson, Santon. I think that's the plan that they would have had at the start of the season. Maybe a Henry bracketed in there. With him not fit, I think that's what they would have wanted throughout the first half. To go into a sort of semi-final knockout game. And again, we're looking to cobble that fifth bowler together. What do you make of that, Stu? I'll throw it back to you.
Can I ask a quick question on that? And this is to you boys probably. So we've talked a hell of a lot about Rachin Ravindra on the podcast. We've obviously spoken to him on the podcast as well. The form that he's found with the bat has been, he's going to get some decent money in the next IPL auction. You would suggest.
He said he likes playing at Bangalore. This is what he said. I didn't see him say that on.
Well, do you know what? I reckon it might be like the old rock music. Hello Chicago, I love you. Yeah, I've been for a hot dog, and then the next night it's hello Philadelphia, I really love a cheesesteak. I think he's probably playing to the home crowd a little bit there. But my question is around the fact that he's probably also, in my view, bowled a little bit more than I would have expected throughout the course of the tournament. You've also got, Glenn Phillips has put in a couple of handy spells. Has that helped with your permutations, particularly that question around maybe Jimmy Neesham as, someone that was offering similar sort of ballast in, that sort of 7-8 or 6-7 spot for him with a bat, but offering a few overs. Rachin now, a top order batter who bowls a few overs. We've talked about it. It's tremendously useful in this format. Has that been something that might have changed throughout the course of the tournament, or do you think that was always the plan?
I would say it's funny, isn't it? Because that was Michael Bracewell's role. That was going to be Michael Bracewell's role throughout this tournament. A lot of people have kind of made stuff about how Rachin wouldn't have played if Kane was fit, but I don't even think he would have been in the squad if Michael Bracewell was fit and hadn't had his injury in the 100, I think, or wherever it was. So, I think it's obviously had a big impact. And I actually think the fact that Phillips has been taking wickets has almost been more impactful because it's meant that they've never had to go to, we need 5 bowlers. Because I genuinely thought at the start, I think in the preview I said it, I thought they would go with 5 bowlers and Santner at 7. I thought they would just have to trust that top 6 to get the runs and say, we also trust our bowlers in the same way that India is now doing, to say, we have 5 good bowlers and we're going to restrict you. But because Phillips, Ravindra have picked up wickets at key times, they've been able to say, okay, maybe we can kind of get away with it.
And you're 100% right about Bracewell, especially in the subcontinent. He was actually consistently taking wickets, consistently bowling at a low economy rate. So that was a bit of a hole that we had. I thought that Southee would have more of a role to play on the subcontinent with his leg spin. But I do feel like we're just cobbling that together a little bit and hoping one of those bowlers come off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like a hope factor. Not that we know it's going to go well. We hope it goes well. And luckily for us, it has gone well with those extra bowlers. But speaking of Neesham, I do think if we look at the 5, 6, 7, right? I'm happy that they're happy to change that order up depending on the situation of the game. I think that has led to probably Latham not having much time at the crease. He scored 250s throughout this tournament, but apart from that, he's had very little opportunity. And that sort of leaves the Chapman-Neesham complexity that I was talking to you about there. What is Chapman's role if is he a finisher? Is he there to back up Latham if something goes wrong? I think he doesn't quite fit. If he's not going to bowl, I would actually prefer to see someone like Jimmy Neesham who can go out there and actually change the course of a game in 20 balls with the bat. But that's probably my only question around that side, that makeup of the side. I don't think Neesham is in our plans for our first 11 if they're fit.
Yeah, because he scored those runs against Australia and then obviously got injured just quite at the wrong time because that was a great knock. And I think if, as much as he hasn't quite been in his best form, Boulty and I have had numerous conversations about how Neesham hasn't really kicked on in that finisher mode, and different times he's sort of threatened and he'll hit a couple of sixes and then he'll just get out playing a silly shot, or he'll hit one straight to a fielder and he gets 20 and he doesn't quite get the 50. That's exactly what he did against Australia. He got the 50, got them to the, he's one ball away from winning them that game. So, yeah, I still feel like he's the kind of guy we want if we need 50 off 5 overs, even though I sort of agree with you that I think Chapman's ahead of him in the pecking order.
Baldy, I'm going to throw to you. I guess, we're not quite neutrals. We obviously live in New Zealand. We were talking earlier on, Lip. I've actually got the passport. Not going to support you, but it's handy. It gets me to 73.
You're going to have to support someone. You're going to have to support someone in these semi-finals.
Exactly, yeah. It gets me to 73 countries around the world in that New Zealand passport. Baldy, from a neutral's perspective, you're India. So get yourself into the mind of the Indian camp. Who are you worried about in the New Zealand setup? What sort of is on your whiteboard in your team meeting tonight?
Phillips and Neesham, I think, would be the two that I'd be concerned about. Of the three that we've discussed, of the Phillips, Neesham, Chapman conversation, I'd be most concerned about Phillips and Neesham, particularly Phillips. Phillips can take a game away from you in the blink of an eye, but so can James Neesham, and we haven't seen it from him yet except for the Australia game. But if we remember back to the sort of Colin Munro conversation that we had here on the podcast, if you have a good tournament, you win 2 or 3 games off your own bat, and I feel like James Neesham has more potential to win a game off his own bat, as you've said, Stuart, than potentially Mark Chapman. From a bowling perspective, yes, Jimmy Neesham is quite considerably the most expensive of those options with the ball. I mean, his economy rate in this World Cup so far is 10.8, whereas you've got pretty good economy out of Ravindra at 5.6 and Glenn Phillips at 5.7. You've actually got pretty good economy out of that third bowling option and a couple of wickets, particularly Phillips in the Australia game. So if you've got all of those options combined, I would plump for James Neesham if I was New Zealand, just because he provides a point of difference in that bowling lineup if you needed a fourth bit of seam. And if I'm India, I'm more concerned about what James Neesham can do to me in the space of 10 or 15 balls than potentially Mark Chapman. Not that Mark Chapman isn't capable of hitting the ball out of the ground, but I think James Neesham just has a little bit more X factor to him.
What do we think, sort of throwing it back to the two neutrals again, what do we think of the fact that this game is at Wankhede Stadium? If we look back at the games that have been played there, South Africa beat England, they scored 399. South Africa again beat Bangladesh, 382. India's got 357 against Sri Lanka. And then, the Glenn Maxwell game where both sides, Afghanistan and Australia, scored almost 300. Do we think that that's... is that a concern for New Zealand or a help for New Zealand? Does it make any difference that this ground in particular has seen very, very high scores and is likely probably to be another flat wicket and a lot of runs?
Yeah, well, look, I think you've summed it up in your last comment. It's a flat wicket, and I think that probably means that at least we should see an even contest. I'm not sure that we necessarily would have said the same if this game was at Eden Gardens. It looked to be gripping a little bit more, so I think there'd have been an advantage there, I think, for India from a bowling attack perspective. So look, again, we also talked at the top of the podcast whether or not this was the fairest set of circumstances in terms of India. So I think that flat pitch, it gives them an opportunity that, the toss shouldn't really, play too much into the semi-final. It should be a good wicket, you would hope. So look, I think that's a good thing for this. I think that's what you would want to see, particularly when you've got that jeopardy. You don't really want too much jeopardy in a semi-final that would be conditions based. You would kind of want a wicket that's going to hold together, conditions that are going to be pretty even throughout the course of the 6 or 7 hours of the game. Would be my 2 cents on the Wankhede versus probably Eden Gardens.
And Raj, I guess we're 20 minutes in, we should probably talk about India. They're quite good, aren't they? They've been very good in this tournament.
So let's throw that back in the same fashion.
Yeah.
Who are you boys? You're going to be on Slack on Wednesday night, and you are going to be shitting bricks again. You're going to be negativity and oh my goodness, and could Pakistan possibly chase down?
I think you're over exaggerating.
I think you're in a bit of a glass house there, fellas.
I think we were all
Shall we read the comments?
I think we were just saying it was possible, mathematically possible.
Mathematically possible that yes, they would have chased 300 off 3.8 overs. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. so let's actually frame the question around the worry. We've talked a hell of a lot about India's strength in depth. I'm sure we'll go on and cover what we think their side will look like. I think we can definitely talk about what their batting lineup would be. But yeah, who are you? Or maybe let's frame it in a different way. Who are you not worried about in that Indian side?
Yeah, how do we beat them, Raj? I think how can New Zealand win this game? Because India has been just so dominant. Where are the potential cracks?
So for me, I think the way to beat India is to slow them down with the bat. And it's a very hard thing to say, slow them down with the bat, but we need to either, if they are batting first, we need to keep them to a score that is chaseable. So that is something well under maybe 350. So I'm talking, 280, 300. I think something that we could chase. If we are batting first, it's putting those runs on the board and then squeezing them throughout the middle. The reason I say that is because I don't really see a weakness in India's bowling lineup. Yeah. I don't think we can go out there and say we're going to go out and score 400 runs or we're going to chase down whatever they score. We need to actually have a plan of how many runs we can score and how we're going to go about it, which bowlers we are going to target, and go from there. But that's a very hard question to answer, Stu.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say the bowlers we're going to target, because I think New Zealand have certainly played that way throughout this tournament. They've looked at each bowling lineup and gone, okay, we've picked these two bowlers or whatever, whoever it is. They've gone, we're going to target those two. And in that India game, it was Kuldeep. They very, very clearly, Daryl Mitchell especially, was like, I'm not going to let you settle. I'm going to come down the wicket and I'm going to dong you over your head for 6 and we're going to get stuck into you. And they actually tried to do the same to Sharma. And they almost did. Will Young got out early against him, but then they started to get on top of him. But Sharma came back so well at the death overs and kind of stifled New Zealand and got them to a very, very gettable total in the end. But yeah, I do think that'll be the key, that India has those 5 bowlers. But who is next? Is it Kohli? Like Kohli or Ayo? Who is the 6th bowler for India? There's actually, that's kind of the level we're talking about. It's Virat Kohli bowling off the wrong leg, and Shreyas Iyer maybe bowling a few. So they almost, like they did in that KO in that other game, it's probably, Kuldeep just keeps bowling. Like if one of them gets hit, that bowler will just keep bowling. And they'll bowl their 10. I
don't see any of them not bowling 10 overs aside from injury.
Yeah.
Which we don't want to see.
Do you think that New Zealand will do anything bold in terms of tactics against India? And we talked a little bit on this morning's podcast, the Australian batting order. I think, Boulder, you said Mitch Marsh would, probably prefer to open the batting rather than bat 3. Steve Smith would probably prefer to bat 3 rather than bat 4. Would you see New Zealand doing anything, like pinch hitting or like trying to manufacture a matchup or anything like that? Or are they going to go in with, I guess there's that quote about Super Bowl, isn't it? The worst thing you can do as a Super Bowl coach is have to change your season strategy at halftime in the Super Bowl. Yeah. Is there any change to New Zealand's strategy through the course of the fact that this is as you said, almost a free hit, isn't it, that you're in the semi-final against them?
Personally, I don't think so. I think that top 4 will remain as has been. Any sort of changes will happen through that 5, 6 and 7 depending on the game situation. But, it's something Brendan McCullum would do. If he was the coach, if he was the captain, he'd throw up a Jimmy Neesham to open the batting or something just to throw them off. Because we were talking about the bowlers before there. I'll let you answer that question just after this. But Siraj, I think, is also the other key for us. If we go out there and have a look at him and the ball's not swinging, if it is coming straight, doing a little bit off the deck, maybe he might be someone we should target as well at the start.
And he has been expensive at times, Siraj. He has been at times in this World Cup, not all the time, but he has been at times below his best or below the standard that he would probably set for himself, but he's been covered for brilliantly by Jasprit and potentially also Sharma, depending on how many games he's played, obviously. So yeah, for New Zealand, I think they're going to have to pick their poison, because they're going to have to go after one of those guys and try and make India change their game plan. And I think that will be the key for New Zealand's batters. If they can force a game plan change for India, that's first blood to New Zealand. Because if India can just dictate terms, I can't see New Zealand having enough firepower comparatively to India to be able to outgun them in a straight up run scoring shootout, right? And I think we all agree, and you guys have already said that.
Oh, look, I mean, as you said, Siraj, if you look at those 5 bowlers across the tournament for India, he's been, the most expensive at 5.2 and over, which is still pretty good in this tournament. It's still better
than all the Australians, who we'll talk about shortly.
And, an average of 31. That's still, I think that's about Trent Boult's stats, who, probably actually hasn't had his best tournament, but still is, I think, second or third for New Zealand. But, I mean, honestly, these other numbers, I'm going to read them out because they are actually just ridiculous. Shami's average is 7. His economy rate is 4.3. Bumrah's average 15 at an economy rate of 3.6. Jadeja, average of 17, 3.7 economy rate, and Kuldeep 22, economy rate of 4.1. I mean, they have been, like I said, they have been so dominant and so impressive in this tournament. And, it is often all of the batters that get all the praise, the Virats, and, he's been good as well, and Sharma and everything. But this bowling attack has been absolutely immense. And, I think you're talking about trying to do something different. I think New Zealand's strength, we're just going to have to play to that and say that top 4 is our strength. Those 4 batters in Ravindra, Conway, Mitchell and Williamson, that's where we have to win the game if we're against this Indian bowling attack. We have to blunt them up front, build huge partnerships and kind of give a platform for Phillips and Chapman or whoever it is at the end to try and go big because, I mean, look, it's amazing to me that we're sitting here. It still is quite amazing that we're sitting here talking about Rachin Ravindra as one of those batters because, I mean, you talked about his life changing. He's been so amazing. I think, everyone should just, at the second, just take a pause to realise that this kid probably wasn't in the World Cup squad and now he's been the player of the tournament just about. It is amazing.
Can I just make one more point just on that bowling? You mentioned all of those terrific Indian bowlers, and they've been perfect for Indian conditions. They know them better than anyone. They're the best at exploiting them. What I will say that for New Zealand will be something that they can take solace from or take into it as a strength is the way that Southee and Boult bowl is very similar to the way those Indian bowlers bowl in that terms that they stand the seam up straight and they get the ball to move and nip a little bit. We saw that in that last New Zealand game where Southee bowled really, really well at the top because he stood the seam up, he got a little bit of movement in the air and a little bit off the pitch. I think if New Zealand are going to do damage to India, it's going to be with those guys that stand the ball up straight and just get that little bit of movement early doors. So they're very similar in terms of the way that they position the seam to those Indian seamers, and you've got guys like Santner to be able to be not quite on the same level as Jadeja in terms of his economy, but close to it, right? And teams have sat in against Santner. So, like for like, there's some strengths there for New Zealand. They're not far away, and if they get a good performance from one of those guys, a Phillips, a Neesham, a Latham, someone like that to step up in the semi-final, that's the path to victory for them, for me.
Yeah, I think it is going to be exactly as you say, that sort of contribution from that top 4. I think the other thing that you can probably take, I'm not going to say solace in, is that India's probably middle order hasn't been super tested throughout the course of the tournament. I think Ravi Jadeja, fantastic player, but I think he would have had 4 or 5 games where he's not got in. And similarly, Kuldeep Yadav's just come into the side.
He hasn't really done much.
He's not done much yet. He's not played the whole tournament. So if you can, with that Boult and Southee axis and a bit of Lockie Ferguson, Santner's often bowled quite early, after the power play and even in the power play, to be able to get them under pressure 3 down quickly, that could be another sort of potential route.
I like the segue into the Indian batting. You're right that New Zealand has to do the damage with the new ball, because don't for one second think that the Indian batsmen are going to pad around Rachin Ravindra and Glenn Phillips. If when they come on, if there's a serious partnership on, they're going to go after those guys, like their part-time bowlers. And they'll go after them. I did want to actually just talk about Virat Kohli, because I like talking about Virat Kohli.
You like Virat Kohli?
I do like Virat Kohli. I think he can play. I think that, something that hasn't been acknowledged about him, the elements of his game is, I'm going to say he's literally playing another game, but I'll put that into numbers for you. I've done some research. So he's faced 615 balls. This World Cup was 100 more than Rachin Ravindra, who's had an incredible World Cup with the bat. He's passed 50 75% of the time, so 6 out of 8 times he has passed 50. He's got a strike rate, this is the interesting one, he's got a strike rate of 88.29, whereas everyone around him has got something well over 100 or 107 or upwards. So he's playing a different game from that perspective. And the other one, he's only hit 6 sixes compared to everyone around him. Rachin Ravindra is the lowest with 17 sixes around him. I know that Rohit Sharma is also number 5 or 5th out of the top 5. Virat Kohli's 3rd, but Virat Kohli has been the mainstay in that Indian lineup that everyone has batted around. I think that he deserves a lot more credit that he's actually laying that anchor and allowing those around him, like middle order that you say, can come in and do a piecemeal kind of contribution because they have someone in there who's ready to bat towards the end. And Rohit Sharma is able to do what he does at the start because he knows that Virat Kohli's there to clean up if it doesn't go right. I think he's been the pivotal figure in that Indian batting lineup and led to a lot of those wins, those 8 out of 8 wins.
Yeah, no secret that he's the key wicket for New Zealand, right?
Right, boys, we're half an hour in. We're going to move to the second semi-final. But
can I just say you said who scares? Who's the scary? Yeah. It's Sharma for me. Sharma up top, that strike rate that he's been going at. The way he's we've touched on it a little bit throughout this tournament. The way he's kind of changed his game, I guess, to be that aggressor and stamp down and say, I'm going to set the platform right now. Terrified of him. We got to get him early.
Right. Predictions, boys. So we're just going to go one word predictions or two.
Let people wait.
We're going to wait till the end.
Let people wait for predictions. Yeah, suspense. Build some suspense.
All right, fair
How long
enough.
have we been doing this for?
I don't know. It seems a while. Right. Second semi-final is Germany versus Denmark. No, that's the wrong running order.
Total football.
It's Australia and it's South Africa. So South Africa, I don't think got too much of a look in our previous show, did they?
I think you might have said that they were in the semi-finals. I know that we talked about them as we have absolutely no idea what's going to happen because they were so good in the lead up, primarily against Australia, just smashing Australia all around the park, and we didn't know. Particularly Raj was unsure which South Africa was going to turn up, and we've seen a pretty good one, I'd say.
No, I've got some stuff for you. A little bit later on.
So let's give the opener to Baldy on this. So his countryman in the semi-final. So Glenn Maxwell is, if he's not on a golf buggy, he's certainly probably getting some rehydrating fluids at the moment, isn't he, Baldy, after that? Look, absolutely insane innings, 200 and probably 75 of them are on literally no legs. Yep. I think it's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen from a cricketing perspective. But coming into this game, where do you feel Australia are? And please, can you answer this in the fact that you're in the semi-final? So there isn't a chance that you're going home. There isn't a chance that you're going to be stripped of your status from the ICC as an international cricket
you
nation.
Want a glass half full
I'd
version?
like it to be, at least a modicum parochial.
Okay. Pint glass half full. Australia are a big chance against South Africa if we can take early wickets. I think South Africa really haven't been tested yet 4 down inside the first 25 overs against a really, really, really good attack that's on song. For Australia...
and when they have, it hasn't gone well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for Australia, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood absolutely must buck the trend of not taking wickets in the power play by striking early as they did against India and putting that South African top order under some real pressure. That is the key to victory for Australia. If we can have South Africa 5 or 6 down through 30 to 35 overs, that will restrict their ability for Klaasen, for Miller, for Marco Janssen and co. to explode and score 150 to 180 runs inside the last 15, 16 overs of their batting innings. If South Africa can keep wickets in hand and bat around a guy like Rassivinder Dussen or De Kock or Vavuma or similar, Markram, then South Africa score 350, 375, and I don't think Australia chase that down against a reasonable attack. So Australia have to buck the trend of getting wickets in the power play, restricting that opening partnership, which, as we said in the last pod, is like somewhere in the vicinity of 60 to 80 on average, depending on whether we bowl first or not. We have to buck that trend.
63.5 have been the average opening partnership for against Australia, and it goes up to 86.75 if they're bowling first. And those numbers for Hazelwood averages 31, economy rate of 5, so decent.
That's
but
good.
Cummins and Stark both averaging 43 at an economy rate of over 6. Starks is up to 6.5. So it hasn't been good for those three at all.
That's not going to get it done against South Africa.
And that's with like a 0, isn't it, against India in the first game?
Yeah,
So.
exactly. So.
I actually, Baldy, I'll come to you. Remember that time at the start of the tournament we were about to put a red line through Australia?
Yes.
So I put a number of articles into a generative text program on the internet, and this is what it gave me back. I'll read you the paragraph. Okay. So Australia's journey in this World Cup has been marked by a series of challenges and adjustments. At the beginning of the tournament, the team faced difficulties with dropped catches, which impacted their performance in the initial matches. The struggle to find consistent rhythm was evident as key players like Steve Smith had to adapt to new roles within the team structure. Put in there Glenn Maxwell's injury, Mitch Marsh heading home, Travis Head coming in midway through the tournament. That's actually pretty good description of it. So how do you feel about the rhythm of Australia going forward, and definitely for the back half of the tournament?
Yeah, there's no getting around the fact that Australia did start very slowly, and we started very slowly, if I remember, against South Africa and against India. They're the two best sides in this tournament so far, I think, along with Australia and New Zealand. So I don't think there's any issue with the fact that Australia have started slowly. But what has impressed me is that, by and large, other than the opening bowling power play situation, Australia's middle order has stood up. Barring maybe the Josh Inglis conversation, I haven't forgotten your question, we'll get around to it. But Maxwell has stood up, Marsh has stood up, Smith's starting to hit some form. His innings against Bangladesh was very, very important, I think, from a momentum perspective for him.
Head hit the ground running when he was back.
Yeah, he'd hit the ground running, although he's nicked off a couple of times and he looked a bit average last night against Bangladesh. But other than that, Australia have kind of fixed that middle order. Afghanistan 90 for 7 notwithstanding. Like, there's still a collapse in there, that's the glass half empty perspective. But I've liked their contributions from their middle order. We've seen big scores from them, and we've seen good finishing. We've fixed up the catching, I think, to a large extent. Australia look better prepared now from a fielding and energy perspective than they looked early in the tournament. They looked very, very flat, and I don't think they were very well prepared in those first two games. They look much, much better now, and winning papers over a lot of cracks, right? It's easy to have fun in cricket when you're winning games. It's hard to have fun in cricket when you're getting pumped. So those things are fantastic. What will be super interesting is if we have those same levels of energy if Marnus Labuschagne doesn't play, because he has been dynamic in the field for Australia, particularly in that Bangladesh game. I mean,
that was a great run out.
The run outs, the energy, the buzzing around in the field. If he could just manage to keep his mouth closed when it's review time, that would be brilliant, because then he would be the perfect fielder. He gives us so much energy in the field that I think that is going to be something we miss if he doesn't play. And it looks like, with Maxwell coming back, with Stark coming back. I mean, Stark comes in for Abbott, that's a clean swap. But with Maxwell coming back, it's a decision of who misses out. I don't think Marsh is going to miss out. So it's either Labuschagne or Stoinis.
Pretty unlucky to score 177 not out and miss out in the next game.
He won't miss out. Marsh won't miss out. So it's between Marcus Stoinis, who's been batting at 7, and potentially Marnus Labuschagne, who's been batting in that middle order.
And Stoinis really, he offers a little bit with the ball. Where would you go? For me, it's a slam dunk. You'd be picking Labuschagne.
Well, I think
he offers more from a batting perspective and a fielding perspective.
Yeah,
but does he offer it at 5? That's the question I've been battling with, because I agree with you. I think Labuschagne's been, by far a better contributor to Australia throughout this World Cup. But is he useful at 5? I don't know.
So I've thought about this, and I'd probably say no. But for the fact that Australia have got 3 guys to really exploit the power play, they've got Head, they've got Warner, and Warner's really, I don't know the strike rates, but he's almost played more like Kohli than he has like David Warner. He's wanted to really make sure that he's going to go out with a bang, but still from a striking perspective, he's up there in the tournament.
Yeah, 107.
He's just got it 106 or somewhere like that. But then you've got Mitch Marsh. So when you've got a dynamic 1, 2, 3, you've got Steve Smith at 4, you've got a Maxwell at 5. I think you've then got room for Labuschagne to bat 5, 6, or wherever, because he can either get you out of the shit, if you need it, and particularly if one of those other guys is still in, then he's Steve Smith number 2. So for me, I'd if I'm putting myself in the shoes of South Africa, I'd much rather they pick Marcus Stoinis.
Can I ask you, Wally, as a Aussie patriot? Would you rather have Marnus Labuschagne there, who's going to bat at 5, and he's there essentially for a collapse?
He's there as insurance, yeah.
Or would you prefer someone like Stoinis, who will chip in with the ball, has the ability to score a important 140 when is required, as we've seen firsthand, but hasn't done that recently? Who would you feel more comfortable with?
Yeah, look, it's a really tough one, because if Australia come off, you'd want Marcus Stoinis to be batting in the last 10 overs. But I think a little bit like Tom Latham for New Zealand, Marnus Labuschagne at 5 is a bit of an insurance policy against an early collapse. And if Australia were 3 for 50, he's the guy you want in there sort of digging you out of the poo, as Adam said. But, if Australia were to go all-out attack and try and match the firepower of South Africa, I think the logical decision would be to play Marcus Stoinis. If they were going to play Marcus Stoinis, I think Australia should have by now, and it's easy to say in hindsight, I think Australia should have by now opened the bowling with Marcus Stoinis, particularly in India, because he swings the ball and he stands the seam up quite nicely, a little bit like Southee does. Not in the same class as Southee, but he does stand the seam up. Whereas the Australian seamers, you look at Hazelwood, Hazelwood and Cummins in particular, bowl a lot of three-quarter seam, a lot of wobble seam stuff, which in Australian wickets you get a bit of jag and you get a bit of nip. But in India, if the conditions aren't conducive to that kind of bowling, you do need a guy early doors that can swing the ball a bit. We've seen actually Marcus Stoinis open the bowling for Australia and be okay. So I just wonder if Australia missed a trick in the Bangladesh game in particular, because we didn't pick Stark to bowl Stoinis, who played in the early overs of the power play when the ball is swinging, and see if there was something there for Australia to be able to exploit.
It's interesting. Yeah, it's absolutely not something I thought of. And with Binksy's comment before around, throwing something new, that would be a big call, I think, to bring him up and open the bowling with him.
I think the other thing is that, the guys at the top of the bowling order for Australia haven't fired. No. But when you look at the stats, they're all probably around 10 or 11 wickets, those guys, I think, Baldy. If I look at Hazelwood 12, Cummins 10, Stark 10. Obviously, that's at the end of the round robin stages, and the guys at the top of the table, I think Zampa's got 22, 23 wickets. He's the tournament's leading wicket taker. If Cummins and Stark finish with 15 apiece, they've probably won the World Cup.
Yeah, probably.
So I think, and we've seen them perform on that big stage, whether it's red ball or white ball cricket. Their class is undoubted, and if there is anything on offer. And I think there was a little bit on offer in that Pakistan England game at Eden Gardens yesterday. Harris Rav bowled an awful first delivery that went for 12 wides. It was that wide, but then although he went for 30 off his first 3 overs, the rest of that first over after the wide, he actually extracted a hell of a lot of movement, and it was a little bit like that spell from Pakistan in the T20 World Cup final at the MCG, where they were just really, really lucky to keep going past the outside edge. So I think if there's a little bit on offer for that attack in that stadium, we could see those guys come back into form. And I hate to say it, but with a Stark, a Cummins, a Hazelwood with tails up, that's something you don't want to see.
We'll know after 3 overs. Honestly, we'll know after Stark's second over if it's going to go right for Australia. I've said on a number of occasions, you kind of do know sometimes with Mitchell Stark after he bowls one ball whether or not it's going to go for him, because if he gets the first ball right, he tends to get his tail up a little bit. If he strays down the leg side, or he gets strays onto the pads and gets clipped for 4 early doors, particularly in the first couple of balls of his first over, sometimes it doesn't quite go his way, and he doesn't really have the same pep in his step, the same sort of tap in his heel, and you don't get the best out of Mitchell Stark. So I think Australia are going to know within the first 3 overs of that bowling innings whether or not they're on. And if they're on, we're a big chance. If we're not, and we're bowling gun barrel straight to the South African lineup, we are going to get taken downtown for a lot of maximums.
Yeah, is it as simple as that? I mean, you touched on it before about the South African power. We haven't talked really about South Africa yet.
Yeah, let's compare it to India. Looking down that list, we wouldn't have been saying this at the start of the tournament. We've just talked about Rohit Sharma, Virat Kohli, Yadav, Sharma, all these guys. Look at the stats that the South Africans have put up from a batting perspective. It is insane throughout the course of this tournament.
It absolutely is. De Kock 66 at 100, over 100. Van der Dussen 55, Markram 49, Klaassen at 40 at a strike rate of 140. And then you've got Miller who's striking at 120 as well. Even Jansen's kind of chipping in there with averaging almost 40. Is the game as simple? Basically, if Australia cannot stop that firepower from South Africa by taking wickets, this game is over.
I think so. I think it's as simple as that for Australia. If Australia are going to win the semi-final, we must make inroads early, and we must make those 4, 5, 6 for South Africa in particular have to bat out of their normal game plan. We have to make them do something different, i.e. get them in early against the moving ball and make them bat 30 overs if they're going to go big at the end, rather than go, well, I get 20 balls to warm up and then I get to smash it.
Yeah,
you got a big in the face.
I disagree. I think that the good thing about South Africa, if I'm taking the positives, you're right. You look down that list. I feel like everyone with the bat has contributed. They've all had opportunity. They've faced balls. Even David Miller down at 6 has been able to face a good number of deliveries throughout this tournament. Their bowlers have been consistent.
Very consistent.
Very consistent across
Quite
the board.
underrated, I reckon.
Picking up wickets amongst themselves. All of their frontline bowlers, except Wankhede, averaging under 27 with the ball.
And they're all conceding under 6 and over too.
Which is incredible. However, and they haven't really given me a reason to feel this way at all, but I feel like their batting and bowling are subject to massive collapse at any point. We've said it. We've talked about it when their 4, 5, 6 or their 5, 6, 7 have been in early or earlier part of the innings. It hasn't necessarily gone well for them. I don't think they bat well with that certainty or change to what their plan is. So there's always that outside possibility that I feel that they're not far from a collapse either with the bat or the ball. You look at 1999, who didn't turn up. Their batsmen didn't turn up in 1999. 2015, their bowlers didn't turn up in this exact same stage, the semi-final stage. In order to win a semi-final, it's going to be the team that plays best across the ball with both sides of the ball.
I love that you've doubled down on this take. I love it so much that you've just gone, South Africa, have South Africa proved to you they're good, Raj? No, they have not.
To be fair, India took Janssen down early and they shot his confidence. You could see it in his body manner, you could see it in his face, you could see it just in the way that he was approaching the crease, just the physical ownership of his bowling space, the crease. Janssen did not have any ownership of that space at all. And if it wasn't for the fact that Rohit hit one straight at their best fielder, Temba Bavuma, when he was on 44, it could have got even worse at that point. So I take your point completely, Raj. There is an opportunity to dominate that South African side, but Australia are going to have to be at their absolute best, and they're going to have to do it in areas of the game that, as I said, they haven't quite done it in the group stage if they're going to take South Africa down.
Yeah, look, I think it is going to be, a little bit of a mental thing, and I think the longer they don't sort of get over the line, regardless of what era, regardless of the fact that we're talking about 1999, which was 24 years ago, and that was Sean Pollock and Lance Klusener and some others. These guys weren't around, but they've still got that weight of expectations, haven't they? And that tag, that choking tag comes up.
Well, they've never made they've never made a final in T20 or World or a 50 over World Cup.
Yeah. So look, I think, I just want to apologise and eat some humble pie as opposed to Raj. I'm going to carry on with my I said Maharaj was going to be a weak link from a spinning perspective throughout the course of the tournament. And we talked a lot about Shamsi, and Shamsi's played, 3 games, and Maharaj has played all 9 so far, 14 wickets at 24, and has looked probably bar Mitch Santner. I think that the best of his craft in terms of left arm spin at this tournament for me.
He's been great, spot on. As I said before, I think that South African bowling lineup, everyone's kind of just talked about the power of their batting the whole time. But that bowling lineup, as you said, everyone has kind of, they have had their moments, like the Janssen. That was...
And Katsir as well.
Yeah, we haven't mentioned him. He's got the most wickets and at the best average.
Can't wear a headband very well, but has bowled extremely well.
Loves the celebration.
Loves the celebration. Yeah.
No, we're very big on him.
But Border, you want to say more on Katsir?
No, he's very good.
He's very good.
He's
very good.
Statistically, their best bowler in this tournament.
Goes good.
Yeah, goes good. Gets no credit. My kind of guy.
I do think the mental thing is quite interesting because of all of that, and because we're going to see, at least for the fans anyway, for South Africa's fans, the amount of replays from the 99, like the 99 semi that are going to come up. I hope Lance Klusener is kind of just hiding away from his TV, because that replay of the way that game finished, and even like I wrote, I said New Zealand, there were shades of 2019. This does have sort of shades of 1999. In terms of the path for both of these sides, Australia and South Africa, I think that 99 tournament, Australia was very similar, weren't they?
Early,
they struggled early, and everyone kind of said, "Oh, they're done."
They had 3 must-wins, I think.
We had to win more than that. Yeah, we had to win. I think we had to win out from at one point after losing 2 or 3 early games to make the semi-finals.
Yeah, and did it. And South Africa was the same thing, kind of dominant early. Everyone sort of penciled them in, and then we know what happened in the semi-final. So look, I think at least mentally, it's for a lot, all these teams. I think the mental game now in these knockout games is going to come in, especially India. We don't know how much that the weight of expectation is going to play on. Is it going to be a huge plus, or is it? And same for South Africa. Is the fact that all of these guys have gone, well, we've just seen South Africa win the Rugby World Cup. We're a new generation. We're going to be the first ones and get pumped up and win this game. Who knows?
Before we get to predictions, boys, I did ask Baldy a question this morning, which he ignored. I'm not going to let him ignore it on this podcast as well. It was around Josh Inglis, Baldy. So Australia made pretty bold call because Carey started the tournament, didn't he?
Played one game,
got hooked. And then got hooked. So Inglis has come in. Look, I am a realist as well as a keeping purist, and Carey is a better gloveman. There's no doubt about that. I think English obviously gives Australia feels he offers more with the bat. The stats so far, 58 runs across the tournament, an average just under 19, doesn't really back that up. Do you think Australia might come to regret that call? Because they can't really, unless they go with Raj and sort of double down on changing your keeper every 5 minutes, they can't make that change, can they?
They can't walk it back now. Even through the fact that, like you say, he's only scored 131 runs, highest score of 58. He's only got to 50 once and never really looked like taking any of those batting innings by the scruff of the horns and really doing something amazing with it. You kind of know what you get with Alex Carey to a certain extent most of the time. You get 35 to 40-ish. You might get 100. I think he scored 100 when Australia chased down 300 a few years ago with Maxwell. But you don't get explosiveness from Alex Carey as often as you get, a solid performance in the middle order. It's been a weakness for Australia for a number of years now. I think pretty much since Gilchrist retired, we haven't really had an explosive wicketkeeper batter like England have had. We haven't had one as consistent even as Tom Latham, or a batter that also is able to wicket keep that can earn his place in the top 5. So it is an area of weakness for Australia. I think, would Alex Carey potentially have averaged more than 18? I'd say so. Would he have given us Australia a little bit more with the gloves? I'd say so. Australia made a bold call at the start of the tournament. Let's hope it doesn't bite them in the keister come semi-final time.
He's a better batsman, right, Inglis? Australia has chosen the better batsman of the two.
I believe that's what Australia feel. I think Inglis is more explosive than Carey. But on the tournament form, going across 8 games that Inglis has played, I think look, it's very easy in retrospective to sit here and say that Alex Carey would have performed better. His tournament form wasn't great going in, Carey's, and I can see why Australia made the decision to make the change. I was in favour of it at the time. I thought it was a bold decision. It was a brave decision to go ahead and do that. Certainly not a popular one. No one in the Australian cricket fraternity and community really thought that was the right thing to do, to drop a guy after one game, and I get it. But if they were going to make a bold decision, I'm glad they went with it. But Inglis, by his own standards, has probably underperformed in the course of this tournament.
Yeah. Are we ready for predictions, boys? Is it late enough in the podcast for you, Stu?
I think so, yeah. I think so. I don't know if there's much more to talk about.
Right.
Well, there probably is. We could probably talk for another hour, but I don't think anyone needs that.
Fair enough. Right. Prediction time. We're going to go in chronological order again. We'll start with semi-final number 1. I'm going to start with you, boys. Heads or hearts, or is it both?
I mean, look, I'm probably the most parochial person on this podcast, but I just think India's too good. I honestly, they've been so good in this tournament. I'm very, and I think the thing about this New Zealand side is I don't think we're at our best. We can certainly beat India on our day. We have. I do think there will be a little bit of the mental side, and that's probably a plus in our side. We have very good memories against India in World Cups, but I just think that I'm worried that we're not going to be able to take wickets up front with Boult and Southee in the way that we have in every other World Cup where they've been at. and that they've been able to do that. They've been able to swing the ball. You're just not getting that in India. It's not happening. And if that's the case, it's going to be really, really difficult to get through that Indian batting lineup. And if they bat first, score a big score, or, chasing whatever we get, and they put, we can't get wickets early on, I don't see how we can win that game.
Yeah. Raj?
Yeah, I'm actually thinking along the same lines of Stu. I think that, I would love New Zealand to win that game.
Mate.
It'd be incredible. But I think the pitch they're playing on, the team they're playing against, I think that it's going to be a step too far. It would have been interesting, I think, if they played on the pitch in the other semi-final that had a little bit in it for those part-time spinners. Might do something incredible off the seam of the new ball. But I just think the pitch is going to be good to bat on, and we're going to see the full extent of India's firepower with the bat, and it will be too irresistible.
Yeah. I'm the same. I think the levelness of the playing field, i.e. that it's going to be a flat deck, means that, if India show up anything like they have in the 9 games so far, I just think they'll be too good on the day. Notwithstanding, if you get, someone has an absolute day out, a Maxwell-esque day out, you never know. But yeah, I think India just too strong at the moment. Baldy, is it a clean sweep?
I have good news for New Zealand fans.
You're going to go with India?
I think India are going to win, and I'm always wrong. I'm always wrong. I think India are going to win. So look, don't bet large on New Zealand. Gamble responsibly. But good news for New Zealand fans, because I think India are going to win.
All right.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think Raj has got the best quote for India throughout this whole World Cup, and that you said they almost only have to do one thing well. Bat well or bowl well, and they win the game. And look, they've just been so good.
Right. Let's start with you, Baldy.
Yeah, okay.
Snake draft.
Australia, a snake draft, yeah. It's like the McIntyre theory. Right, Baldy, what do you reckon?
I have bad news for Australian fans, because I think they're going to win. I think Australia are going to win. I don't know what it is about this matchup between Australia and South Africa, but I kind of like it for Australia now. I think Australia are going to win. Don't ask me how, don't ask me why. A lot of it will come down to those first 4 or 5 bowling overs for Australia, but I think Australia will do it.
I've got bad news for Australian fans as well. I actually think Australia are going to nick this as well. I think this has got shades of some of those performances. I look at my bookcase here. I've got the Steve Waugh No Regrets diary, the 97 Ashes diary. The stories in there around when they did have their backs to the wall and pulled 3 or 4 really, really key performances together. And it just feels like they're in that sort of vein at the moment, Australia. So I think you'll see one of those big 3 seamers stand up in each of these games. And particularly in the South Africa game coming up. So, I think Australia get over the line as well. Raj?
We know what you think.
Look, if South Africa win, I'll be the first person up there singing the national anthem in Afrikaans for the final if they do beat Australia. But I think Australia are going to be too strong. I think there's a massive mental component when it gets to this knockout stage of cricket, and South Africa haven't proved to me that they are able to win those games where that's on the line. It's all on the line. The pink slips out there. They've been very consistent throughout this tournament, South Africa. They've played probably better than Australia for the majority of the tournament. But I just think Australia are going to be too strong on the day.
Can I say, I think whoever wins the toss wins. Is that allowed? No. Because I actually think that is going to be super important in terms of the mental stuff. We have seen South Africa. It's no secret at all that when they bat first, have been a far better team in this tournament. I do think that is important. I will say, on the other hand, I actually think South Africa is going to win this game. And because, sorry to not have a clean sweep both ways, but I really think that I do agree, the mental side of things, and we've seen that when they chase. Yeah. But the positive side for them is that they've just humped Australia a number of times. And I do, before the tournament, I know, yes, maybe it doesn't count at all, but I do think they'll take a lot of confidence from that. And yeah, if I do think toss is the key decider, but if I have to just say right now, I think South Africa takes it home.
Awesome. Well, guys, I think that's a good place to end the podcast. So get your money. Clearly, on a New Zealand South Africa final is the
I'll take that.
Is the sort of lesson to take away. We are going to be back in your podcast feeds after every game as well. So our normal 7 a.m. recording here in New Zealand for release about 8 a.m. New Zealand time. So even if we're all not on the finals preview, we'll get the proxies into that show so that you can listen to our individual final predictions, and that will be live sort of later in the week, sort of Friday of next week. If you do want to dip back into the back catalogue, we've got some pretty decent news, views and interviews, because it's been a daily podcast every day for the last 30 or 40 days. So Mike Cussy talks some World Cup cricket for sure. We've got Mike Hesson in the recent interviews as well. So do dip back and listen to that if you are missing our dulcet tones for 2 or 3 days in between shows, which will be a little more infrequent now. We're into the business end of the tournament with these games spread over the next 3 or 4 days. And then we will be back with the This Week in Cricket to review the final about this time next week on your podcast or video podcast feed. But for now, it's good afternoon and God bless from us here in Auckland at about 3:30 p.m. We hope wherever you are, you've enjoyed listening to the podcast. If you do, please, as the YouTubers say, smash like and subscribe. It does help others find the podcast. And at some point we'll be able to earn 4 cents an episode as well, which will be very, very helpful.
Much appreciated.
Yeah, we'll be able to update these polo shirts at some point. But for now, it's good night or good afternoon, and we'll see you next time on the Top Order podcast. See ya.